Compliance has long been seen as a cost of doing business, a necessity for risk mitigation. But what if it could become so much more? A driver of trust, maybe even a strategic advantage. As emerging technologies reshape financial crime detection and regulation scrutiny tightens globally, the question is no longer whether institutions can comply, but whether compliance can be done intelligently, transparently, and at scale. This episode of ATP wants to investigate: can compliance evolve from a defensive to transformative? What does regulatory alignment look like across regions? Are we going to get to a place where there's actually harmonization? How can compliance become a competitive advantage rather than a potential bottleneck? And are there radical ideas that still need to be explored in this space? Stuff maybe that hadn't been considered, but that we can consider today. To unpack these questions and more, we are joined by Markiewicz, the CEO of Silent8, and Boon Hiong, Industry Applied Innovation Lead and Head of APAC Market and Technology Advocacy Security Services at Deutsche Bank. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for coming and doing this today.
Oh, thank you.
How are you guys doing?
Thank you. Great.
Yeah. Super. It's great to have you here. Okay, let's start with one big question. I think both of you have seen this, right? But think about this. Can compliance, as we said in the intro, become a catalyst for trust, innovation, and growth, rather than just a defensive cost of doing business? Boon, why don't we start with you?
Definitely. If we liken compliance to a fast and powerful car's seatbelt, right? With compliance, you can go faster. Without compliance, right, you're always, right, looking over your shoulders to say, hey, how fast could I move, and then how should I be moving? So compliance is actually part and parcel of product design. It should be part and parcel of product design, and it should be part and parcel of the competitive advantages consideration. Now, one of the key challenge, right, is that compliance, because of its close relationship with regulations, it's seen as a cost. It's seen as, being a fear-based, penalty-based topic, right? It's not seen necessarily as a growth accelerator or a speed enabler. So I think it's a mind shift. It's always there. It should be. In Deutsche Bank, we have actually worked with our compliance professionals to enable sustainable development that reduces the U-turns and the redos. Yeah. So yes, definitely can.
What do you think?
I
what do you think about this idea that it can be an accelerator?
I saw this in real life years ago. So this is why I'm pretty bullish on this thesis. I saw this many years ago. We had this idea, I don't know, in 2016, 2017, when we started doing a solid research on this stuff, that a lot of this work and these decisions are made by compliance officers should be actually done by AI. So this was pretty early on, and we started.
This was in 2016.
Oh yeah. The first deployment of our agentic AI in Standard Chartered was in 2018, and I remember back in 2018, 2019, when this was already in production, when some decisions in case of sanctions compliance were actually made by AI, not by humans, and I mean majority of them, not all of them, but majority of them, and all of them were happening instantly instead of waiting for some investigator to pick a case up and do some work. I talked at one event to a CEO of Standard Chartered in Vietnam, and she told me that back in the day, before we did this, the cost of onboarding new customers was so large because of the compliance cost that they did not have good products to sell to these people to make money off of it. But now,
so the cost of onboarding somebody was more than the LTV because of the cost of compliance.
Because of cost of compliance, and she told me because you did this stuff, now this flipped. And we could invest more in marketing, invest more in sales, and sell new products to these people and make money. So for me, I think we went live in 2018. So let's say it was end of 2018 or maybe 2019, this type of time frame. But this is what I've heard from a customer, that normally when we're talking with people from compliance, we're hearing stuff like, well, it will help us reduce cost. Deploying some technology will help us reduce cost, or some other reason. But here I heard from someone from the business that they said there's this trickle-down effect that reached me, and it actually, I have a better offer, a better product to my customers than my competitors.
But this is what you were saying before. You kind of said it in passing a little bit, that compliance actually should be part of the product design.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
What does that look like, and how do you affect that?
It means then that you need to have a multidisciplinary team, right? With business people, with compliance aware people working together to say, hey, I want to do this. What are my compliance requirements? And very importantly as well, right, the interpretation of compliance, and maybe that's where sometimes right AI can play a very important role, is that the interpretation. Is it too aggressive? Is it too conservative? Because if it's either way, then right, it becomes a challenge, right? You can't have it to be too aggressive, the interpretation, nor you can't have it to be too conservative. Right? So the benefits of compliance is immeasurable, but it's really important. It translates into speed to market. If I need to go through an approval process that takes 9 months versus 9 days,
What are you doing, right?
It's speed to market, and then it means that the business can hit the market right when the market window is there and it's nice and it's conducive. But but how do you measure that? That becomes tough.
How do you measure it? But also, how do you?
So I'll tell you, I don't know.
Go ahead. No. But I'm less concerned with how you measured. I want to follow up on this because this is actually really interesting to me. I'm thinking about this when Boon's talking. Like AI, and I think this is part of what you were saying too. AI doesn't have a personality. It's not afraid. It doesn't worry like that. Their kids aren't going to be able to go to school if it loses its job. So if it makes the wrong decision. You know what I mean? All this stuff.
Oh, but
it's programmed by people.
Yeah.
So how does it actually work where you're saying that AI is doing it, but it's not being too aggressive, but it's not being too slow? How do you modulate that?
So
does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So like to what he said first. Like I want to pick up on this first, because how do you measure those trickle down effects?
Yeah.
And I have no clue.
No idea.
Every contract that we signed since then, I'm trying to plug this in and just say like, hey, listen, there's this story that I've heard years ago, and I heard more of these stories. There's an additional value than just doing some work faster in this spot. If this work affects other parts of the bank, that there's value in other parts of the bank. Can we please measure it somehow so that we can charge more money for our AI? And I said, like, we don't know how.
We don't know.
There's no way.
I've been working on this because we are very fortunate to work with very talented AI fintech, right? Codex, and we have actually been looking into, hey, how do you actually use and deploy AI on compliance stacks? So we broke it down, and then we do an evaluation before and after. As a compliance officer, right, he or she will need to analyze first of all the compliance rules. That takes maybe 1 hour. With AI, maybe take 3 minutes.
Yeah,
right? And then that's only the first primary source of compliance text. But what about the other related text that you need to consider? That takes another 5 hours. With AI, right, with graphing, you can actually do it within 3 minutes. So that's right, 6 hours reduced to 5 minutes.
But this is in the spot. Can you then figure out
how much money does it help you make?
They were doing this job for some reason. This job affects someone else just because they did it faster, for example.
Yeah.
What's the downstream effect on someone else's job that they were doing this for? So if they were doing the seatbelt work, what type of maneuver did they enable?
Or how much faster could I get to Boston if I'm driving from New York?
Yeah, that's a tricky.
So that's the spillover effect, right?
Yes,
so,
yes.
If let's say I used to take 1 week before I pass the thing to you, and then you take another week, it's okay. If I take now 5 minutes, I save up that nearly 5 days I pass to you, you still can take 1 week, but overall will be faster.
Yes.
If I take 5 minutes and you take another 5 minutes, oh my God, right? We just shrank, right? 2 weeks into 10 minutes.
Yeah, but then at the end, the customer will notice, and suddenly he got a different service, he got a different product, he got much more value in a much shorter period of time.
Right.
So now you as a bank can, for example, charge, more, be more competitive, get new business where you couldn't before.
This was your standard.
It's time to market because, in the financial industry, everything is about instant, right?
Instant payments, everything must be instant.
Onboarding needs to be fast and things like that. But how do you continue to be prudent and to ensure that you do the right things while being fast without cutting corners? So I think that's where AI comes in.
We did this actually at Goldman Sachs without artificial intelligence, and this is years ago, right? What we did was we built an entirely new portfolio trading team there. We got rid of the existing team. This was years ago, right? But the other thing we did was we built a really strong relationship with our compliance team because the stuff we were doing is very sophisticated. And you're right. Sometimes it could be in the moment. A client comes to us and says, we want to do this trade. Can we do it? And if we can make, let's say, $5 million. If we can't do it, so that's how it's kind of measurable because we built that better relationship. I don't want to tell you what the P&L numbers were, but it was factors more money.
Yeah.
And partially was because we installed technology, and the other part was because we had a much better relationship with compliance. And they were like, that's compliant.
I want to go back to the point about using AI and the interpretation, right, being not too aggressive or not too consistent.
Yeah. Please.
That's still human dependent.
For sure.
A key difference is this, right? With human, you don't know until he or she comes and do the assessment. With AI, you know in advance, and you can then fine tune it. And with a group of people to say, you know what, maybe we should just calibrate this sort of outcome, do an A/B test, the sort of things, so that
it's more consistent. It's more consistent.
Yeah, it's more consistent, and you know upfront how you actually be working on. So that's a key difference.
And also, like if you're building for like we were building for forever, for those kind of a mission critical use cases. You like you said about this decision making, worried about the job and things like this.
So many other things, but yeah.
And so many other things. The problem is that for these use cases, you have to have a very different mindset than you have for those maybe a mass market use cases.
For sure.
ChatGPT, there's a lot of agentic AI available in those top products right now. You can ask ChatGPT, hey, book me a flight to London tomorrow, and this is my credit card, let's go. Hit enter. You can do this now in their browser. You can do it with Comet and Perplexity. You have so many agentic ways of running this query, and just would you?
No,
if you hit enter, are you flying
it
to London tomorrow?
Right.
At what cost? What's the route? So the thing is that you would not even with this a mass market solutions. They serve a different purpose. When you're doing stuff for compliance, you cannot allow yourself for this type of ambiguity. And when you want to set this when you want to set this technology to actually serve you and be useful in this type of use cases, then what he said, you said what's you said as a financial institution, as someone who knows how to manage risk, you said what's aggressive, what's not. And then you expect this to follow your guardrails and your guidance, and then you're in a safe spot. Then you can do this stuff book me a thing for tomorrow, and I don't care, because I know everything should be fine. I will do some QA, of course, after just to sample, just to make sure it's good. But it's but I can actually trust its decisions because it was set up to do these type of decisions.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit at the beginning of the recording about regulatory alignment. And I think about this a lot, actually, right? Because the rules in Singapore may be different than the rules in Australia, which may be different than the regs in the United States, which may be different than all the rules that come out of Europe. Do we see a situation, though, guys, where these rules, because things are moving so fast, where in the old days, we traded a portfolio trading book. It was mostly just in Japan, right? And in the rest of Asia. So we only really cared about the regs out here. MiFID and all that other stuff that was going on in Europe and the United States for our business in particular was completely irrelevant. But things are moving a lot faster now. Do we think that we're going to get some kind of harmonization? And do we want that, actually?
Years ago, I thought yes, but looking where the world is trending right now, I think no. So I think that we're more falling apart than coming together, in general, looking around the world. And
is that good or bad for business, you think?
It makes our business harder. I think it makes it harder. When everyone was trying to kind of a few years back unify everything, globalization was harming everyone, was supposed to be a part of this one huge market. All the things were going towards simplified everything, and we could do those massive global deployments across 100+ market for a bank. We could do all this stuff easily. There was no thinking where the data is being stored, who can you move the customer data from this market to this market? Can it be processed somewhere else? There was not much of that, so it was pretty easy to do something at large scale. And now I think it's just more complex. And in most of the cases, the only right answer to deal with this stuff is technology, and just but I think we're more trending towards being more closed down, more separated, and more in our fighting stance instead of just coming together.
What do you think? I'm not disagreeing with you, but
I don't know that.
And I don't like it
just an opinion.
But my whole life has been based on the world is just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller and closer together, right? And that's, in a way, we talked about it before we started recording, but that's the reason why the three of us are in this room. And none of us are from the same place. None of us have the same cultural background at all. And yet we're still here because the world is so small.
Yeah.
But what do you think about this from a regulatory?
Firstly, I think
standpoint?
that harmonization is not equals to uniform rules, right? The rules will always reflect right the maturity of the market and the capacity on the market to absorb certain technology. With recent developments, right, I think it has become clearer. And in fact, right, from that perspective, you could say that it is actually more beneficial for fintechs when you want to expand, because you then know which market should be prioritized and which market, right, may not necessarily be the first priority, because the lines are clearer to be seen. Previously, with globalization, everybody tries to be the same, although underneath it, right, it is still different. Today, the differences are more clear in order to facilitate, right, better calibrated decisions by businesses and by the society. So from that perspective, then, right, there'll be markets that you expand, there'll be markets that you don't, there'll be markets that you use IT, there are markets that you use really super leading edge IT, and there are markets that you don't. It's calibration. So
it also means you can get a stronger product market fit because you pick a market for your product that's more suited to your product and the way it's set up.
Exactly.
So you can take advantage somehow of this situation. Like
you can consider. So which means to say, right, you don't go into a market thinking that hey, it's the same as Europe, but after spending 3 years of investment, this is so different from Europe, right? So I'll say that while harmonization is not equal to uniform, but globally there is a set of global standards, right? So you've got the IOSCO, you've got the FSB, you've got the IMF, and they set a core common floor, which then, right, is adapted locally. So I think this will be the way to that will develop further until such a time whereby another paradigm comes.
Interesting, like because I always have this dream that you're building this global tech company, like you just go everywhere, but it's always hard for different reasons in different markets, and I just feel that those are like a drifting apart, and we can see it with our customers, like what changes do they, and we only work with large financial institutions, like these are our customers. So I'm just thinking, like I'm looking at what type of transformations are there going there internally. And I'm just looking like that this is that there is this shift, and I'm just thinking like how can we figure out how to help them better at bigger scale so that we can benefit from this shift.
If I could give an example, then right, agentic AI is really hot, and then autonomous agentic AI is even hotter than agentic AI, right? And then people think about AI making decisions, and then all the explainability, the questions of accountability all comes in.
Transparency, right?
Yes. Yeah. However, right, depending on the market, if you use an AI model, as itself, without passing to another AI model, is that necessarily agentic? Because you put two AI models together, potentially it could be considered agentic because one does a job and then it passes on to another job, right? But if a market is not ready for agentic, then could you say that, hey, this is not agentic because I just use one model and then the other system use another model and I use API to connect the data? It's not a matter about framing, but it's a matter of, hey, how then do I explain, right, and fit to the regulations on autonomous, and how do you explain, there could be a awareness raising requirement to say that, although they make autonomous, but two things, human, right, will always be accountable because there's no legal persona in agents.
right. You can't sue like agentic AI, can you? I don't know.
And,
I hope not.
Go ahead.
And you've always got the logs, right? Logs of how the AI make decision. So when people, there's a lot of emphasis and focus on autonomous decision making. However, there are logs. Then the logs gives explainability. Then the question is, if I say human in a loop, and so that I can understand, but the logs are in megabytes because they make a lot of decisions very fast. And if the human then uses another AI to interpret the logs, is that still considered human in the loop?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
Like, so I always
just to close this, right?
But
so
that's a good architectural question also for designing solutions like this. I always assumed it does. Like it's like because I always assume that you just translate some of the things.
But in your expansion, then this is where the awareness raising is very important. Oh, I am still in charge as a human, but I use another tool Previously, it was Excel spreadsheet, but today, right, it's another AI agent in order to interpret for me so that, I understand what's going on with that so-called autonomous agentic AI tool.
So what happens in this situation? You mentioned data before, and you mentioned this idea of like the world is not coming closer together, but maybe it's becoming further apart. We're creating like more moats. I know that there are certain countries, because when I was building businesses, that they said the data has to stay inside. But imagine a situation, this gets back to your agentic AI and autonomous agentic AI situation, right? And we can leave APIs out for a second unless you think it's necessary. But imagine a situation where a business in Singapore, a financial services business in Singapore, needs to interact with, and it's agentic AI, with a business in Korea. But the data in Korea has to stay in Korea unless they've changed those regulations in the last 10 years, right? Then how does it get to that data if you want it to be agentic? This is a big problem to solve, no? And as a global institution, you must be running up against this somewhere.
I think we are running up against it everywhere.
Fair enough. Okay.
In Europe, as long as you've got data privacy law.
That's the point. I just use that as one example.
But that's a very good example because I'm just thinking about how our deployments look like.
That's what I was hoping.
Let's say if some of the things might be a bit easier when it comes to maybe some sanctions or PEPs or this type of like a screening that financial crime compliance people do. But when I look at, and they can be more globalized by financial institutions, and they use a few instances of our solution for the global footprint, and it just but when it comes, very often when it comes to making autonomous decisions in AML, in transaction monitoring, in anti-money laundering. A lot of these institutions like that we work with have all those investigations very much localized. Like I'm saying, not everyone, but a lot of them. So it's almost like you get an agentic AI per instance, per country,
because the regs are localized.
They cannot because it's pretty easy to the way that I use a proxy for it in the way that I'm looking at the job being done currently without technology. So if you have some work being done somewhere in a huge like a work center somewhere in India, in Poland, in Mexico, or something like this, it means that they somehow figured out for this use case how to move data around, how to make the decisioning in one spot. So probably when you're improving this with technology, it won't be hard to do it also like this. But when you have a use case where everything is happening literally country per country, or like a country and division, like it's really like a sliced and diced, then you just say like when I'll be coming in with technology, there's probably going to be problem to bring it all together, because if they could bring it all together without technology, they probably already would.
Just to close off the agentic AI one, I think
I have more, but go ahead.
You have more, but okay, then I'll just add that.
No, go.
Maybe it can be important to de-hype and then to demystify, right? Autonomous agentic AI, AAA, right? Wow, sounds like another version of artificial general intelligence.
Right.
Yeah, and that has got a different vision than it's two models talking to each other via API.
Yeah,
JSON format. So. I think it's important to de-hype and demystify a bit so that, from all angles, the understanding can reach to more people. And then, a broader understanding and awareness always works better for new products and product rollout, I think.
And if someone wants to get and build out this intuition, like I think that N8N, one of those like online things for building workflows, like visually. I don't know if you guys played with this. It's a very good tool for someone to get a very quickly, without any, let's say, like a coding background, some intuition of how these things work. Like you can put together something very simple, like that takes your email from your inbox, does something, write up an answer, put it in your drafts, and like you can click play, and without even coding, you have something based off YouTube tutorial in like 15 minutes up and running, and then you just kind of like and then also gives a good intuition in terms of how these things actually work inside, because it's not AGI, it's not some magic.
No, it's not.
It's actually a normal piece of software that leverages artificial intelligence somewhere in along this workflow, along this chain.
Yeah. And then on data localization, right? I think it's an onion that needs to be peeled.
For sure.
Yeah. For example, you localize the data, yes, but most jurisdiction allows you to keep the data offshore for processing. So your global architecture, right, still works. So some data, like for example, personal information that is always sensitive across the whole world, and that should be, and therefore is subjected to stricter requirements and governance. Then, the industry, right, such as yourself, and from your view, there are privacy-enhancing technology these days.
So this is what I was going to ask about. So if we're sitting here having a conversation about agentic AI, autonomous agentic AI, other types of emerging technologies, right? Because I do think they're still emerging. I was thinking in my head, right, the key reason why countries, sovereigns want the data to be there is one, so they can have control over that data, but two, so it doesn't leak out in a way that is dangerous for them at some level. So is there a zero knowledge proof way of being able to like give the data or the information around the data without anybody actually knowing what it is? Right, because you said you can have that data offshore for processing, but then it has to come back. But is there a way to do this with like much more sophisticated technology so that you don't actually know what it is, but you can process it without actually knowing?
The most advanced utilization of this tool is actually in the crypto and blockchain space.
Exactly. That's another emerging technology. So I didn't want to like give the hype words around this, but zero knowledge proof means you just don't know what it is, right? So it's all in the blockchain and crypto space. But is there a place for that in this idea?
In compliance?
In this idea of like data and compliance.
I think there's always a place there whereby, without, it's data minimization, right? Whereby, and then, which is good for everybody, including the regulators. Then you don't need to worry about data leaks, data hacks. But, you get the right signal to say that I have done this, I can prove that I've done this, but you don't need to ask, right, for realms of information to see that I have actually done this.
I'm thinking through some of the use cases,
Go for
right?
it.
So I'm thinking through the use case of AML. So let's say I sit here in Singapore. I'm working somewhere in Singaporean bank, like in Singapore, local bank here, like a branch in Singapore, and I have to investigate. A customer for potential some AML breaches. Like looks like they did something bad. I need to do an investigation. So what I would do, like as a human, I would pull a lot of KYC data to figure out, okay, who my customer is and what they do.
What do I know about them?
I will just be looking at all their transactions, and I'll be looking at their counterparties, thinking that if they're getting money from you, like why?
Right.
Like who are you? Okay? And why are you sending them money? Why are you sending money to my customer? It's like I would be then doing the opposite. I would be actually pulling more and more sensitive data into this equation of mine to figure out if I'm dealing with someone who's laundering money right now, or it's just a normal person doing normal stuff, normal for them. Like it's like in this case, if I would think AI should be doing this type of investigations, this AI would not do such a good work if I would limit the amount of data that would be available to it. Like I would prefer it to even have more data than a human would to make decisions. because I would just be thinking maybe when I'm doing this investigation as a person, maybe I'm on the clock. Maybe I need to finish work at some point.
Get home.
Maybe I need to get home.
Right.
Maybe I don't have time to run this like a 5 deep researches on ChatGPT and wait for answers and just I need to go. Or I want to go. Maybe I don't need to go. Maybe I just want to go. Either way.
I promised my kid I was going to be at his football game. Kind of thing.
So it's like I would be thinking that something that would actually make better decision than a person would have access to more of this sensitive data. And then how do I move it out?
And I think this is where I think Martin touched on this. We talk about countries' localization. I think Martin has just talked about organizations' boundary as localization. I'm institution A, Martin's institution B. I can't share data of my customer to you. You can't share data with me. But for AML perspective, right, I only know the activities within my boundaries. And once the transaction leaves my boundary, it goes to yours. Right, I lose sight of it, and then you don't know what I've seen, and you only see what you can see as well. Therefore, it always makes sense, from a technical perspective, if we can see each other's data, but from a banking secrecy, from a data privacy, we can't share. I think this is where privacy enhancing technology comes in.
But this is a very good idea, because I think that Netherlands are trying to do something like this, where they're just saying let's take few banks together, share their data in one pot, and try to look for different money laundering and terrorism financing and other patterns because people are leveraging the fact that you can only see what I allow you to see on my account. You don't see what I do in another bank. You don't see what I do in another institution. So if we put this together, we can see patterns that are not visible today. So because if I would put myself in a criminal shoe this time, I would not be doing more than it's required. Like I would just pass the bar. Like why do I jump like a super high over it? Like if I'm not getting any reward, I will just be stepping over it. It's not too high, by the way. So I'll be just stepping over it, and I'll be just happy. Like if you're doing this, like you're right, bringing data together and then thinking about how to connect it without sharing directly customer data, but maybe sharing just some derivatives of this investigative work, and then connecting those derivatives in a way that you can actually derive some conclusions out of the sum of them. Might be a next break that kind of like allows you also to fit within the current regulatory framework.
Yeah.
So I love this idea of like that the institutions themselves, because we talked about localization at a country level, we can talk about localization at a regulatory level, but the simple fact that like institution A and institution B cannot share data, except in very, very rare circumstances, it can make this idea of even like a false positive, right? Because institution A may have data that's going to be like, no, this is not illegal at any level at all. But the data that you have may be like, this dude is a complete criminal.
But this is but in this case, everyone else should know that this guy is a complete criminal. Because if you're identified once as some Pablo Escobar dude, and then in the and the other bank, you're just like he's a father of two. He's going to church every Sunday. Like he's such a good member of the community. Like of course he is. Like that's the part of his life that he's showing you with these products. Like so if there's a problem, like this is something that if this would be shared, it would help. It would help a lot.
If Pablo walks into the bank, I think we have other problems. but fair enough. We talked earlier. I think you were actually the one who said like humans in the loop, right? And because you've been working on this since 2018 or maybe even 2016, has your view changed at all over time on where humans should come in who just have like intuition and experience and stuff like that versus this should just all be technology? Is there a balance there that we still want to keep, or are we just so far away from that now that it doesn't matter?
I think if we decompose things a bit, human will always be accountable. There's no legal persona to
But
bots.
do you think that could change?
Until and unless, right, you can sue a bot, and then the bot, right, can actually make good on the damage, right, which then it raises a lot more questions about existential and everything else, right? So let's go with the reasonable assumption that human will always be accountable, and therefore it's not a matter of question also of whether should a human be in the loop or on the loop or be part of the loop. It's actually right. How can a human be effective as a supervisor? Decisions is making very fast. It's being made very fast by bots. How do you keep up with that speed? Right? Do you then, right, can you turn into a rubber stamping entity because, right, you basically trust a bot to do what it does, and then if there's anything, you just, okay, fine, I just click, okay, let's go, auto edit, auto everything, because I can't go wrong. It's a career thing. If I follow the bot, right, if I don't challenge the bot, if the bot gets wrong, it's a product liability. It's not my judgment. If the product says A, I says B, I challenge the bot, I have to defend myself.
So can I give you a real life example of this?
Sure.
When I was working at Deutsche Securities in Tokyo, but also when I was working at Goldman Sachs, it's the same thing. I just did that.
It's close to home.
I just did that so you would smile. But when I was working as a trader, we built some of the first algorithmic trading models, right? And those algorithms did their job autonomously. And I think I may have mentioned this to you on the prep call, but I think it's important to note for people that are watching, and that is before the algos were there, the sell side traders would, the buy side traders would call us and be like, "You are so stupid. How come you can't make a better decision on how to trade? You do this every single day." But once we put the algos out there, in a lot of cases, you just let them run. Right? You just let them run. If it was like a closing target thing, you just hit a button and it would do all these things you expected it to do based on liquidity and all these other parameters. But then at the end of the day, you were still responsible. Right? So I think that's probably what's going to happen with agentic AI as well, because there was really no difference between, obviously the models were simpler back then, but it was the same idea of like, I decided which algo to use to meet some kind of benchmark, and I was ultimately responsible. And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, and I agree that for foreseeable future, that's like humans gonna be responsible, and like and that's why it's gonna be in the loop. But one thing, when you're looking at how OpenAI defined their path to artificial general intelligence, they said that agentic AI is like a stage that we are at right now. Is this like a stage number 4 or something? Stage number 5 is agentic organizations, when you basically can have
Really,
the whole
though?
bank being AI.
Really though?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. In foreseeable future, we don't see signs of this yet.
No, I don't
But
think
in this foreseeable future, like we're just looking at us being still in the loop and in the driving seat, really. And one thing that we've noticed, and I have a very strong bias when answering this type of question because of what I do, and because of how I make money. Like, so obviously, like I'm biased here.
The more the better. Kind of
Yes.
thing.
But I'm looking at this. When we were designing our product, the first version back in the day, the concept remained the same, and the place of the human in this whole concept was in the same spot. So we were thinking, what if we would learn from people making decisions, the reasons why they make those decisions, and then show it to a person, like someone who will be accountable for this model at the end, and show them these are all the cases and all the reasons why people make decisions in those type of cases. And now you tell me, like you like, this is what we've learned, everything that we've learned, and then we had to, of course, like use another model to explain what we've learned and what these reasons are. And the question was, what's the right way? Like, so if you would be in charge of a team of 1,000 people and then making some decisions, you're just taking out all the reasoning and showing to someone, and then you'll find that majority of those reasonings are not consistent with each other. So you give the same case to like 10 different people.
Yeah, because they're humans.
Even if they arrive with the same decision at the end,
Right.
the path, the
They could've come
argument, the
from here.
logic, it's going to be different.
Yeah.
So then the question is like, what's the right way in you think that these cases should be handled? And then someone makes a decision. This is the right way. This is the high bar. This is what everyone expects to be done. So let's memorize this for this type of decisions and forget the rest.
That's why you have your agentic orchestrator.
And that becomes a job. Like that becomes a job that did not exist. Someone who's actually doing this on a daily basis, because for every time if a system like this says, I don't know, send it to people, and they'll make a decision, it will pick it up and learn like, well, how did they do it that we couldn't? So this person in charge suddenly becomes the person that have this job every day to figure out from what we've learning from people, like what's the actual thing that I should allow the model to do in the future and what's not. Like if people are deciding like, well, it's Friday afternoon.
Again, we're back to Friday.
Yeah.
We're back to wanting to go home.
Yeah, I want to go home. It's late or something. Like, is this the right reason to rush through things, or and just or is it not? Like, probably not. So you want so if you have this abstracted and explained to you, this was actually the actual feature, like a factor for this decision-making process, you just say, well, that's not something that I would like machine to be doing.
Yeah, but I'd like to add a context to this, right? So we say that, at this point in time, it's reasonable to assume, right, that a human will be accountable at this point in time. Because, right, before this point in time, there hasn't been really effective technology that could institutionalize human experience, human knowledge, and human behavior into models. Yeah. It used to be, even, right, in AI, right, generally it's more deterministic, but these days there's more stochastic or probabilistic, right? And then with probabilistic, it can start being unpredictable, which is a good or a not so good characteristic depending on the use case.
And that unpredictability comes from
the unpredictability comes from the fact that it can seize a lot of possibilities, right, and then it can choose the possibilities.
So the more it knows, the more it learns, the more it's likely to be like, I don't know, last time it was this, but actually this time I think it's going to be this. So
and I think from compute power to hardware to software, right, it's reached a stage whereby at this point in time it's now becoming possible to construct personality engines, right? And then if you trace, right, the personality of, let's say, yourself, at the stage right now, and your personality could change in, maybe 10 years' time because of your experience. And if it keeps learning from you, then, 20 years after this conversation, then maybe that's where, right, that persona could be creating another bot, and then, that could actually then start changing the game.
100%.
Powerfully.
I mean,
So,
in our cases, like in those practical, like you're very right that if you look at those reasoning models today, those like I've ChatGPT 5 Pro, those let's say like the Grok Super Heavy, like the end of the line, the best state of the art ones. The reasoning process is so interesting, and there's like you say, like so much. It can go multiple ways. I love what Grok did with their approach with this, like their heaviest model. What they did, this idea that there's actually 4 separate agents that are trying to solve for your query. And when they're done, they're looking at what every one of them have created. And it's not like a democratic voting. If one of them went completely sideways, there's an examination. Maybe this is something that's innovative, and actually we should repeat the whole task with taking this innovation that this one guy come up with and factor it into the input. So, or he went sideways because he's dumb, and we should ignore him.
Right.
Like it's like, but this is like you will always have a slightly different reasoning path. Even if you gain to the same number at the end, to the same conclusion, to the same answer, you will have a completely different path of reasoning, like you have with people.
But again, we've all sat in meetings, right? And I had this theory where I'm like, I really wanted to be in the meeting where that was decided because that seems very strange. Yeah. And anyway, I can give you tons of examples of this. But we've all sat in a meeting where some guy or some gal is like, oh, we should do X. And everyone's like, that's insane. Like, there's no way we should do that. And yet that was the right thing to do, right? Yeah. So it's a good point.
Yeah, and I think where we are waiting is really right. The emergence, the true emergence of adaptive AI, right? Polymorphic AI that learns on the spot, real time learning. It's important because right today, again going back to this period of time, market changes very fast. Can the AI application keep up with the changes? Because when it is trained and fine-tuned, it's for that specific time period.
So you're always trying to catch up.
Yeah, so there is a catching up. And then, the moment there's a market stress that is not trained, you try to look for, its, history, its correlation, its learning.
We see this all the time in algorithmic trading, right? The market's going through massive stress, and the algorithm just goes, sold, everything's sold, I'm out.
Yeah.
Even though normally it
because
wouldn't
you default to, the fallback position.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
you know what? If I do not know this,
I'm out.
I'm executing the most conservative and safest
I'm out.
path.
Yeah.
So, however, and I think this is where cybersecurity leads the path in, adaptive, AI, virus, and things like that, right? And there are lessons to be learned there. How do you actually learn real time and adapt real time?
So you mentioned compute, but you also mentioned this point in time. Something that I hadn't considered before we sat down today was, where does quantum fit into all of this? Have we thought about that at all?
I didn't.
You did or didn't?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, neither did I, but I'm just saying, like, I've had tons of, and I'm not a quantum physicist, like, I don't understand completely, I don't think any of us do how quantum computing works, but it's going to change the paradigm.
And if it really works.
Yeah, I get it completely.
If you can, I mean, Google recently announced that they had a massive breakthrough, and they actually did run some algorithm that they can prove that it worked, and it was actually useful. So,
but I mean, change the whole paradigm for computing, right? But it also gets back to this decision making too, because the way quantum works is it's not just doing one thing and getting to an endpoint; it's doing a bunch of different things. And from an agentic AI perspective, or even from what you said that Grok was doing, this ability to do all of that in real time, really fast. This is an outlier. Let's fold it back into this thing. Let's do it 1,000 more times. From a decision making standpoint, getting back to compliance and AML and KYC and stuff like that, it could be a massive paradigm change for how that stuff gets done, not just from a time-saving perspective, but also from an outcome perspective.
But we assume then that cryptography doesn't keep up, right? But cryptography will
I know.
And then there are right now quantum-resistant cryptographies as
So
well.
we're having the same conversation on the crypto side, right? It's like, what does quantum do to that as well? Yeah.
I think that from practical reasons, when we apply this technology today, especially in financial institutions, especially in regulated, in compliance, in this type of use cases, you don't want this to reason like that. Like, you don't want this to go off script too much. You want this to actually do what you said.
You want to have parameters.
If there's any doubt, leave. Leave it to a person. Like it's like if there's any like, if this would like the idea here to have an practical help from these type of systems today would be not to push the boundary of let's push the risk because it's going to be fine because I did a calculation. You want to tell someone, hey, it's going to be way better than it is right now. A lot of risks that we had are off the table. New risks are almost, or even like they're not even here. So we're playing the safe game here, not trying to do compliance in this like a crazy thing. Don't put your seal bet on, or put it around your head and like let's go. Like it's like let's go as fast as this car can.
Actually, it's true, right? As a rule of thumb, the model will only learn the happy paths. There are the better model that will learn the unhappy paths. But we always assume then that, when it starts going into edge or unhappy path situation, right, that's where you really need an expert human to step in.
And there's also this thing that when you're trying to think about what Grok is doing or what OpenAI is doing, they're creating something for general purpose. They're creating something for everyone on the planet to use, everyone on the planet to give them their data, and to get a lock on humanity because they're building a product too. They need to monetize this product. And when we're thinking about using these things in enterprises for some particular functions, we cannot just copy paste what they're doing because a lot of the stuff is not meant for those use cases. So we should not be blindly like just taking whatever someone else is doing and just copy paste it. I don't think that a compliance AI agent in a bank should know how to, I don't know, like cook a cake or something like this. It's not really
donuts. It's irrelevant.
Yeah, it's not really relevant. So like their mind should not be trashed with this type of stuff, and they should be laser focused on some kind of like a part of the job that's simplified enough for them so they can do it without any risks and hand over to someone or something else the results so that the job can continue. And that's probably a practical way of dealing with this today. And like we said, like when OpenAI is telling that a company like mine or the company like yours will be actually an AI thing in the future, it's like, okay, maybe it will be, but I think that there's it's not practical to us to think about them this way today. It's more practical. Like there's a lot of technology available that helps us in our daily lives.
Yes.
And this the technology can be so helpful if we just find a way to make it helpful for banks, for financial institutions, for enterprises, for fintechs. And if you look on financial crime compliance space, if you look at who's on the other side, like people who are actually bad actors, they're using all this stuff. They don't have this like a data sharing problems. They don't have
They're
regulators.
way past that.
I even would bet, I don't know, but I would bet they don't have model risk management teams. I don't know that. It's a possibility they don't have model risk management.
At least, what they don't have that what we have as regulated entity, right? And then goes back to, hey, with all this advanced technology, why are we, why shouldn't it be more used, right? I think, it falls into three questions. First of all, can I explain to my regulator in a way that my regulator understands?
Right. If something goes haywire, you both have a problem.
Yeah.
But if something goes haywire for a guy who's committing a crime, he's like, oops.
Yeah.
Right?
I just lost $1 million. Like, okay, again,
I'll make it back next week.
Let's go.
I'll make it back next week.
So if I can't explain to my regulator, that's really a first hurdle. If I can explain to my regulator, but my regulator don't understand, that's that's another challenge as well. Then, right, can I gather enough evidence? And then my evidence, right, needs to be reproducible so that that it's robust, right? It needs to be able to have this a counterfactual, right? Yeah, and then it needs to be able to facilitate causal investigation. What has really caused this versus, right, bad signals that has caused it. So if you don't have this, or if your advanced system is not able to support you in this quality type of evidence, then maybe that technology is still not mature enough to be used.
So this is really interesting. You really nailed the first part of what was going to be my last question, and that's this idea of explainability. So I'm not going to ask because you've already answered the question, and I love when this happens.
That's so efficient.
It's so efficient. Yeah, I'm just going to leave. You guys can just keep going. But the last part of that explainability is auditability. You have to have something to be able to explain, right? So you have to be able to audit it. How important is that?
I mean, like you just said, like without this, it's you don't get off the runway. Like it's like you're not gonna fly. Like that's it.
Yeah, And then it goes back then, right? That's why compliance needs to be part of product design. Because,
Yeah, I
right, if
love
you
this.
build,
Ending where we
if
started.
you
Go ahead.
build auditability as an afterthought, it becomes expensive. It becomes, right, unwieldy, and then you may not be able to capture all the audit trails that you need.
So in your analogy for seatbelt, I would say that cars that are enabled to have a full self-driving mode, if you're driving them manually, they will be much safer to drive than your car with two seat belts and God knows what else that protects you. Because if this car see the incoming accident, it can take some actions on your behalf of help you take some actions to avoid an accident, to minimize the damage, or to do something else. And the seatbelt then looks like the very old school technology.
Looks like a Band-Aid.
It looks like a Band-Aid. So I would just say that this is really the future of compliance and in what we all do here.
But at the same time, just to add, right?
Go for it.
Too much compliance and too much safety drags growth and drags innovation, and it's not actually it can be undesirable as well, depending on the state of maturity of your economy, right? Or your state of advances in the adoption of AI. If I, for example, if I don't have any AI in the in my company now, but I want to put everything about AI rules and regulations first, then maybe, right, I won't even get
100%.
AI off the ground, right? So again, going back to that car seatbelt analogy, right?
It's a good point.
An airbag can be dangerous.
Yeah, this is pretty important because if you look at a geopolitical stage right now, when it comes to AI and all those technologies, you have US and China being in a full-blown war race or whatever you call it, and then a lot of regulations and a lot of compliance and a lot of worries that normally you'd have goes off the window. It's a lot of things, we make a lot of exceptions and just to progress things and just to move faster because the other guys are racing. And I would like to see more of this risk appetite taking when it comes to countering bad actors, as for example financial institutions, and from regulators and from institutions that, like you said, we cannot be so dragged that we're standing still while the others are just plowing
Racing
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, boys. Martin Markiewicz, Boon Hiong Chen. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. I think we could have gone for another hour. This was amazing. Thank you both so much for doing this. Really, really, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.